To get some experience with these commands and these mappings that we're talking about, we're going to go ahead and create 3 VLANs from scratch here, 100, 200, and 300. VLAN 100 is going to be a secondary private VLAN of the community sort. We're going to put ports 1 through 5 in there. VLAN 200 is a secondary private VLAN of the isolated kind. We're going to put 5 ports in there just for fun as well. Going to get a little practice with the interface range command there. And also VLAN 300 is going to be our primary private VLAN, and that is in Fast Ethernet 012 will be in that VLAN. And of course our router, it will be connected to a switch port doing what? Running in promiscuous mode. Let's go ahead and bring the switch up. This has been initialized. You see the line protocol on interface VLAN 1 just came up after the reload, but after the erase, I should say, the write erase. So it's been initialized with everything gone except a few lab commands. Therefore, let's go ahead and start with our VLAN creation. We'll go in numeric order and go with VLAN 100. And we're going to be using the command private-VLAN here a lot. And 3 of these 4 terms you're familiar with now: community, isolated, and primary. And notice the iOS help does not mention the isolated and communities are secondary private VLANs. You need to know that, but I know you do. And we've got that association up there. We will use that when we're configuring our primary VLAN. But right now we're in 100, and that's one of our secondaries, so we'll make that one a community. And no other options to be aware of, but, oh, here's something to be aware of. Private VLANs can only be configured when VTP is either off or it's in transparent mode. Off mode just sounds odd, but there you go. It can only be configured when we're in transparent or off mode. So, I know you remember this, but here are the modes. Client, server, and transparent are really the 3 we think about with VTP modes. Off tends not to be thought of as a mode, but technically it is one. Right now, we're going to set it to transparent mode. And we get a little confirmation. That's great. We should be able to move forward now, but definitely something to know for the exam and your real-world planning as well. Now, let's try VLAN 100 again. And let's try making it a community private VLAN again. And no problems at all. So we'll exit out of there for now and go to VLAN 200. And I'm going to make this an isolated private VLAN. Our secondary, no options there. And the secondaries are now in place. So now we'll configure VLAN 300 as the primary and make the associations. And actually, you can go straight there from here. I know that I exited out of 100 and went back into 200, but you don't have to do that. So we've got VLAN 300, private VLAN primary, and this is where the association command comes in. So you will be using all 4 of these options: association, community, isolated, and primary, when you start your private VLAN configuration. And we will do that. And we get VLAN IDs of the private VLANs to be configured. Sounds a little vague there. What we're looking for here is to put in the secondary VLANs that are associated with the primary that we are now configuring. So we can do that. Doesn't matter if you put them in numeric order or not, but 100, 200 will do. And that for right now is it. And actually, we're on the way to getting this done. And actually, I should say a little over halfway, because we've now done the following. We've configured VTP to run in transparent mode. Great. Now we know that. We created our secondary private VLANs, both isolated and community. We created our primary private VLAN, and we created an association between the secondary VLANs and the primary VLAN. So now it's time to go to the interface, and something I can't wait to show you here. It's not a tricky command, but sometimes you have to put 2 commands in. We're seeing on the switch, actually. And they look a lot alike, but they're not. And we're going to start with our promiscuous port, which is port 12. And we're going to start with switch port mode, a command that we've used many times with access and dynamic and trunk. But now we got a private VLAN option we're going to use. And let's see what our options are from there. It's either a host port or a promiscuous port. We know it's promiscuous. There are no options after that. And that is it. Now we have to create a mapping. And the command is not switch port mode private VLAN. It is switch port private VLAN. That's why I wanted to put these two right next to each other, because you see the mapping option there. We've got a couple of options here: association, host association, and mapping. And the reason I wanted to show you this is when you're going through your config, especially at first, it's really easy to put switch port mode private VLAN and then promiscuous or host, and then right after it switch port mode private VLAN, and then you start getting errors and you're thinking, okay, I know I got to do a mapping here. How do I do it? And the command for the mapping is switch port private VLAN, not switch port mode private VLAN. So let's see, we're on the promiscuous port, so actually we're going to do a mapping here. And the primary is what we need to put first. And then we're being asked for the secondary VLAN IDs, which is 100, 200. And then that's it. So a couple of long-winded commands there, but again, I'm not going to go over switch port mode versus switch port private VLAN again, but just watch that on your exam because it's really easy just to gloss over one of those words. So we've got switch port mode, switch port private VLAN. Now we're going to go down and configure our hosts. And we're going to get a little practice with our friend interface range, because if we don't use interface range here, we got to go to port 1 and put in a 2-line config. Then we got to go to port 2 and put in a 2-line config, and 3 and 4 and 5. And it's just a lot easier to use our old friend interface range, but I can't do it from there because I got to back up one. And now fast, and it's going to ask me what number. You'll notice I dropped into interface range configuration mode there, and also that I put a space between the 1 and the dash and the 5, and you got to do that. If you put those together, every iOS I've ever worked with is going to come back and say that's wrong, which drove me crazy for a while until I realized you have to put in that space. So I'm trying to save you the pain, blues, and agony there. Make sure you put your space in interface range. Now, let's put the two commands we need on the hosts, and we start with switch port mode. Private VLAN should look familiar, except we're not going promiscuous this time. We're going with host. Now on these ports we need to use, we had a bunch of line protocols go down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I left some live hosts on those ports, so the line protocol has gone down. It should come back up when we're done with the config. So let's finish the config and see what happens. Now we need switch port private VLAN, and now host association. Then you put your primary VLAN in, and then you put your secondary VLAN, the VLAN that these ports are going to be part of. So that was 100. And we're good there. And there the line protocols come back up. So glad you got to see that live, because if you have hosts that are connected to those ports while you're configuring it, this is going to happen in the middle. It's just something you got to get used to. Now you know it's going to happen. You don't have to worry about it, but the line protocol should come back up then when you are done. So let's go ahead to our other range, 6 through 10, and we're going to do switch port mode private VLAN host. And then we're going to do switch port private VLAN host association. And this again is where you put your primary. And that's where you put your secondary. And these ports are going into VLAN 200. So that's what we need. And that is the end of our config. A lot going on there. If you just follow that checklist, create your VLANs first, in my humble opinion, and then make them, community isolated. Then you make your primary and your association. Check all that stuff off, and then all you've got to do is configure your interfaces, whether it's the promiscuous port or their hosts. If they are promiscuous, you've got to put that mapping on there, but if they're host ports like the last two sets were, then you're going to use the host association command. And by the way, the reason you didn't see line protocols go up and down there when I did 6 through 10, and I know you were thinking that, is because I did not have hosts connected to those particular ports, just 1 through 5. Let me show you a very quick verification command, and it's what you'd expect. Show VLAN, private VLAN, and this is fantastic because if you do make an error in this config, it's probably in the mapping. And right here you can see, okay, here's the primary 300 and it is mapped to 100. primary 300 is also mapped to 200. Then check your types, make sure you're getting the results you want, and then you can slide over and just check your ports, and that's it. Also notice your promiscuous port is a member of both of these because it's in both VLANs really. So that is it for private VLANs. Coming up next, what are we going to do next? We're going to do some more stuff on the switch with VLANs, and we're going to use some access lists to restrict some access instead of going all private VLANs. So that's coming up next.